You've heard it before, that medieval people were filthy, that they never washed, that the streets stank, and so did everyone in them. It's an easy picture to imagine: mud, waste, sweat, animals, and no running water. From a modern point of view, it sounds unavoidable. But that picture isn't complete. Medieval people thought about cleanliness. They talked about it. They judged each other by it. And in many cases, being visibly dirty was noticed, remembered, and commented on. This is a world without modern plumbing, without deodorant, without soap as we know it, and without any understanding of germs. And yet, people still washed their bodies. They cleaned their clothes. They scented their homes. They complained about bad smells. So did medieval people actually smell? The answer depends on who you were, where you lived, what you did for a living, and what time of year it was. It also depends on what people at the time thought clean was supposed to mean. To understand that, you have to step away from modern assumptions and look at how cleanliness actually worked in the medieval world. Not the jokes or extremes, for everyday reality. That's where this begins. To understand smell in the Middle Ages, you have to understand what people at the time meant by cleanliness. It wasn't the same thing it is now. Medieval people were not trying to eliminate bacteria. They didn't know bacteria existed. Cleanliness wasn't about sterility. It was about order, appearance, and propriety. It was about what could be seen, smelled, and judged by others. Being clean had moral weight. A clean body could reflect a clean soul. Dirt was often associated with excess, disorder, or moral failure. At the same time, paying too much attention to the body could be criticized as vanity. Cleanliness was expected, but only up to a point. Washing focused on what was visible: hands, face, feet. These were the parts of the body exposed to the world. Clean hands before eating were not optional. An unwashed face was noticed. Someone who smelled bad in public could attract comment, ridicule, or suspicion. Smell mattered. People complained about it. They wrote about it. They took steps to avoid it. Herbs were used. Scented water was used. Clean clothing mattered. In crowded towns especially, bad odors were difficult to ignore and socially costly. Cleanliness also applied to spaces. Homes, workshops, and streets were expected to be kept in usable condition. Not pristine and spotless, but functional. There were rules about waste, latrines, and dumping refuse. These rules were not always followed, but their existence tells you something. So medieval hygiene was not absent, but was selective and practical, shaped by belief, custom, and limitation. The question is not why medieval people didn't wash more. The question is when washing was expected and why. And that brings us to the body itself. Most washing in the Middle Ages was not a full bath. It was partial and targeted, done for specific reasons. Hands were washed regularly, especially before eating and after work. Faces were washed in the morning, usually with cold water drawn from a well, a stream, or a container kept in the house. Feet were washed when they became painful, swollen, or damaged. These practices were common even among the poor. A full bath was different. It required time, fuel, and large amounts of water. Water had to be carried, wood had to be cut, everything had to be heated. For most households, this was work that needed a reason. Baths were taken after heavy labor, before important events, on certain days of the week, not daily, often not weekly. There were also health concerns. Medieval medical theory suggested that hot water opened the pores of the body. Open pores were believed to allow illness to enter. After major disease outbreaks, especially plague, this idea became more influential. Some people began bathing less, not more, because they believed it was safer. How often someone washed depended on who they were. Wealthier households could afford more water and fuel. Some had private bathing spaces. Peasants relied on rivers, wooden tubs, or shared facilities when they were available. townspeople fell somewhere in between. So washing did happen, but it was selective, practical, and controlled by effort, belief, and circumstance. And when people did finally take full baths, many of them did not do it at home. That leads directly to the bathhouse. In towns and cities, bathing often did not happen at home. It happened in public bathhouses. These were common across much of medieval Europe, especially from the early Middle Ages through the 14th century. They were not unusual. In many towns, they were clearly marked, regulated, and regularly used. Bathhouses were supplied with heated water. Large wooden tubs were filled and reused throughout the day. The water was changed when it became too cold or too dirty. People bathed naked. In many places, men and women bathed together. At the time, this was normal. Bathhouses were not silent or private spaces. People talked, they ate, they drank. Business was discussed. Food and ale were often brought in. On busy days, musicians might be present. For those who could afford it, bathing was as much a social activity as a practical one. This drew attention. Church authorities were often uneasy about bathhouses, not because of washing, but because of what else happened there. Mixed bathing, nudity, gambling, and prostitution became associated with certain baths. Rules were introduced, then ignored, then introduced again. Finally, disease entered the picture. As plague outbreaks spread, public bathhouses began to be seen as dangerous, crowded rooms, shed water, heat believed to weaken the body. All of it worked against them. By the late Middle Ages, many bathhouses closed, declined, or changed their purpose entirely. But for a long time, they were part of ordinary urban life. People went there to wash, to talk, and to be seen. Bathing was not rare, it was not shameful, it was normal. And outside the bathhouse, people still had to manage dirt, sweat, and smell using whatever materials were available to them. Soap did exist in the Middle Ages. It was not the hard scented bar you would recognize today. It was usually soft, uneven, and homemade. Most often, it was made by mixing animal fat with ash or lye. In parts of southern Europe, olive oil was used instead, producing a milder soap that was traded north. It was available, but it was not abundant. Soap was not used for everything. Water alone was often considered sufficient for routine washing, especially for hands and faces. Soap was saved for heavier dirt, for washing fabrics, or for moments when being visibly clean-matted. Using too much of it was seen as wasteful. Water itself was a limitation. It had to be drawn from wells, carried from rivers, collected from rain, or fetched from public fountains. Every bucket required time and physical effort. That alone restricted how much washing could realistically be done in a day. In towns, water sources were shared, sometimes regulated, and occasionally restricted during dry periods. Cleaning was labor. Fabrics were soaked, beaten, and scrubbed. Floors were swept. Tools were wiped down. Ash, sand, and rough cloth were commonly used. Some substances that seem unpleasant now, including stale urine, were used because they worked and were easy to obtain. None of this was quick. None of it was convenient. Keeping clean required strength, time, and constant effort. Hygiene in the medieval world was about choosing carefully when cleaning was worth the cost. And even when bodies were washed and tools were cleaned, smell did not disappear on its own. That brings us to clothing. Cleanliness in the medieval world was often managed through clothing. Linen was worn next to the skin. It absorbed sweat and body oils. It could be changed more easily than the body could be washed. For many people, this was the main way of staying clean by everyday standards. Fresh linen reduced smell and improved comfort. It signaled order and self-control. Someone wearing clean linen was noticed. Someone who did not was noticed as well. Outer clothing was treated differently. Wool was common. It was durable and naturally resistant to dirt and odor. It was aired more often than it was washed. Garments were hung outside, exposed to wind and sunlight, and worn again. Washing wool too frequently damaged it and wasted effort. Smell was managed deliberately. Herbs such as rosemary, sage, and lavender were used to scent clothing and living spaces. Small bundles were carried or sewn into garments. Scented waters and oils existed, especially among the wealthy, but they were used sparingly. Appearance mattered. Dirty or neglected clothing could suggest poverty, illness, or moral failure. In towns where people lived close together, how someone looked and smelled affected how they were treated. Clean clothes, combed hair, and trimmed beards were not luxuries. They were social signals. Medieval people did not expect bodies to be scentless. That was not the goal. The goal was control, to manage smell, to remain acceptable to others. And those expectations did not exist in isolation. They were shaped by the spaces people lived in, and those spaces created their own problems. Cleanliness did not stop at the body. It was shaped by the spaces people lived in, and those spaces imposed limits that no amount of washing could fully overcome. Most homes were small and crowded. In the countryside, houses were often single-room structures shared by entire families. Sometimes animals were kept inside as well, especially in colder months. The floor was packed earth, occasionally covered with straw or rushes that trapped dirt and moisture. Fires burned in open hearths. Smoke lingered. Soot settled on walls, clothes, and skin. These spaces were cleaned, but only to a point. Floors were swept. Waste was carried outside. Bedding was aired when weather allowed, but smoke stains remained. Dampness returned. Cleanliness here meant keeping the space usable, not eliminating dirt entirely. In towns, the situation changed, but it did not improve. Streets were narrow. Buildings were close together. Waste from households, workshops, and animals often ended up outside, despite rules meant to prevent it. Many towns had regulations about where rubbish could be dumped, how latrines should be built, and when streets should be cleared. Enforcement was inconsistent. Human waste was handled through pits, cesspools, and shared latrines. These had to be emptied regularly. The work was unpleasant and dangerous, but necessary. When it was neglected, smell spread quickly. Contamination followed. Animals moved freely through many streets. Rain turned dirt into mud. Dry weather turned it into dust. These conditions were constant. People adapted to them instead of expecting them to disappear. Living in a medieval town or village meant accepting a certain level of dirt. Cleanliness was relative. It was defined by what could reasonably be managed in a world without modern infrastructure. And when illness appeared, these everyday conditions became more than just inconvenient. Illness was a constant presence in the medieval world. People did not know what caused disease. There were no germs, no microscopes. Illness was explained through imbalance in the body, bad air, divine punishment, or corruption of the environment. Cleanliness mattered, but not in the way it does now. Smell was closely associated with sickness. Foul air was believed to carry disease. This idea, known as miasma, shaped how people responded to outbreaks. Strong odors were feared. Stagnant air was avoided. Homes were aired out when possible. Herbs were burned or carried to counteract bad smells. During times of plague, these fears intensified. Hot water was believed to open the pores of the body. Open pores were thought to allow illness to enter. Because of this, some people reduced how often they bathed, believing that keeping the body closed and protected was safer than washing frequently. This did not mean hygiene disappeared. It shifted. Clean clothing became more important. fresh air mattered more. Controlling one's immediate environment took priority over immersion in water. Public bathhouses, once common and accepted, began to be viewed as dangerous. Crowded rooms, shared water, heat, all of it appeared risky in a time of disease. Fear shaped behavior. When illness arrived without warning and killed quickly, people adapted using the ideas available to them. Some of those choices reduced risk, others did not, but all of them were attempts to regain control in a world where control was limited. By the late Middle Ages, cleanliness was tied to survival, and those changing ideas did not affect everyone in the same way. Hygiene in the Middle Ages was not the same for everyone. It depended on where you lived, how much money you had, and what kind of work you did. Cleanliness followed social lines, even when the limits were shared. For peasants, hygiene was shaped by necessity. Water had to be carried. Fuel had to be gathered. Time spent washing was time not spent working. Cleaning was practical and minimal. Hands, face, and feet were washed because they needed to be. Full bathing happened occasionally, often tied to the season or a specific reason. The goal was not comfort, but function. Townspeople lived differently. Access to wells, fountains, and bathhouses made washing easier in theory. In practice, crowded housing and shared spaces meant dirt accumulated quickly. Craftsmen, traders, and laborers often ended the day covered in sweat and grime. Appearance mattered more in towns, where strangers noticed each other and reputation had value. Smelling bad could cost business. Among the nobility, resources changed the scale, but not the reality. Servants carried water, heated baths, and cleaned living spaces. Private bathing rooms were more common. Scented water, fine soaps, and clean garments were easier to obtain. But beliefs about health still applied. Excessive bathing was avoided. Castles were not clean places. Smoke, waste, and overcrowding were constant problems. Across all classes, there were shared limits. No one lived in a scentless world. Everyone dealt with dirt, smell, and discomfort. The difference was how much effort could be spent controlling it, and how visible that control needed to be. Cleanliness in the medieval world was a reflection of circumstance, not a sign of ignorance or neglect. And that brings us to the question that started all of this. So did medieval people actually smell? Sometimes yes, by modern standards often, but not in the way the stereotype suggests. The Middle Ages were not an age of constant filth. People did wash, they did clean. They cared about smell, appearance, and social judgment. But they lived in a world where dirt was unavoidable, water was limited, and effort had to be carefully spent. Cleanliness followed different rules. People washed when it mattered. They cleaned what they could. They managed smell rather than eliminating it. Clothing, air, and routine mattered more than constant bathing. Ideas about health changed with fear and disease. Habits shifted, adapted, and survived. Judging medieval hygiene by modern standards misses the reality of how people lived. These practices were shaped by knowledge, belief, labor, and survival. What seems insufficient now was often practical then. Understanding that reality strips away the caricature. What's left is a world that was uncomfortable, constrained, and human. That is what medieval life actually smelled like. Thank you for watching Medieval Realities. If you want more history without the myths, you know where to find it. Cheers.